Good evening. This is CTV News for Thursday, July the 9th. I'm Sonia Shrivastava.
And I'm Byron Scott. Thank you for joining us.
Well, a district man responsible for a violent crash that killed 2 women in Capitol Heights in 2013 learns his punishment. Ronald Hayes Jr. pleaded guilty back in March to 2 counts of negligent motor vehicle manslaughter for the car accident, which also left 5 others seriously injured. Our Rochelle Metzger has been in the courtroom in Upper Marlboro and has more.
Today's sentencing was very emotional for the families of Brittany Queen and Brittany Everett. At one point, prosecutors played video showing the moment of impact when the car Ronald Hayes was driving slammed into a minivan carrying the 2 women and 4 young children. And despite claims by his attorney that Hayes is not a bad person, he just made bad decisions, the judge gave him the most she could according to the plea deal, 12 years behind bars.
Brittany was my best friend. She was my only girl, she was my angel. She was my protector.
Francine Queen's 21-year-old daughter Brittany and her friend 23-year-old Brittany Everett were killed and 4 children seriously injured when Ronald Hayes Jr. struck the minivan they were riding in. A female passenger in Hayes' car was also badly injured.
She sentenced Mr. Hayes to 20 years, suspend all but 12 years, which we think is entirely appropriate. 2 beautiful, beautiful young women in our community had their lives snuffed out by Mr. Hayes, whose behavior on the night of this incident demonstrated breathtaking disregard for human life.
Queen's family came to court wearing shirts with her picture. Francine says her daughter was 10 weeks pregnant at the time. For her, 12 years is not enough.
He took a life, he should do life. So actually he took 2 from me.
He turned his lights out. He was a person who was under the influence of drugs and alcohol. The facts of this case could not have been any more horrendous than they were.
On December 8, 2013, Hayes was being pursued by police when he turned his headlights off and ran a red light at the intersection of Hill Road and Central Avenue in Capitol Heights, barreling into the minivan at a high rate of speed. He then ran from the scene. A police helicopter helped officers track him to a wooded area where he was found and arrested. The whole thing captured on video.
It was horrifying to watch that film because I had never seen an accident like that before. And it just tore me apart to see how he hit that van and knocked it over the way he did.
For me and my family, this starts the healing.
Now, despite being limited by the plea agreement, the judge did go over the sentencing guidelines, giving Hayes 20 years, suspending all but 12, and she noted his lack of remorse was a big factor in her decision. At one point, she turned to him and asked, "How difficult is it to say I'm sorry?" In Upper Marlboro, I'm Rochelle Metzger, CTV News.
Thank you, Rochelle. And Hayes was also sentenced to 5 years of probation.
The trial of a man accused of ordering a hit on his uncle ends in a mistrial. Brian Mayhew and 2 other men were charged with the December 2012 shooting death of Nico Mayhew and the injury of his 2-year-old son. Now, prosecutors allege Mayhew ordered the killing to keep him quiet about an earlier double murder. In the end, the jury said, quote, there was intractable dissent among them in all charges against Mayhew. The state's case centered on phone call recordings allegedly between Mayhew, who was behind bars, and his co-defendants. Defense attorneys say there was no physical evidence presented at the trial linking their clients to the scene. State's attorney Angela Alsobrook says she was disappointed in the verdict and says she may request a retrial.
Well, meantime, Latinos and other groups across the region protest recent comments made by Donald Trump against immigrants. Our Patricia Vallone is in the district with more on that story.
They're calling for a public apology, joining forces for what they say were racist comments by GOP presidential candidate Donald Trump. Now, Trump first made the disparaging comments during his June 16th press conference. During that time, he said when Mexico brings its people, they're not sending their best. They're sending people that have lots of problems. They're bringing drugs. They're bringing crime. They're rapists.
This building behind us, the labor, will be done by a lot of Latinos, okay? And we shouldn't be part of that. Latinos should not go to his hotels. We should boycott him economically where it hurts the most. We are a big, big number in society, okay? The numbers are growing and we should be respected. We count and we matter. And people need to take, note of that we're not going to take it lying down and we're going to come out and we're going to protest.
He is pretending to be a candidate for President of the United States, a Republican candidate, and is ignoring the incredible, valuable principles on which our democracy is based. Tolerance, inclusion. He is full of hate and full of xenophobia, and he thinks that that is what represents the best of our country. We're saying, no, it is not.
Now, since Trump's comments, numerous corporations and celebrities have disassociated themselves with many of his businesses. From D.C., I'm Patricia Vallone, CTV News.
Now, immigrant groups say they will continue protesting as long as the Donald keeps making those hateful comments.
Okay, and Governor Larry Hogan campaigned on rolling back what he called 40 tax hikes and regulations imposed by his predecessor. Today, the governor signed an executive order establishing the formation of the Regulatory Reform Commission. The 12-member board is tasked with reviewing the state's regulations and determining which should stay and which should go.
We will look to see what regulations have outlived their usefulness or have failed to accomplish their objectives or are so poorly written, implemented, or interpreted that they cause much more harm than good.
The executive order will be in effect for 3 years. The board will issue an annual report each December. Public hearings will be held across the state.
Maryland is appealing FEMA's denial of disaster aid. Last month, the Obama administration rejected the state's request for $19.4 million to help repair damage done to Baltimore during the riots. Now, the agency stating, quote, aid is not appropriate for this event. In a letter to the administration, Governor Larry Hogan mentions several incidents where FEMA provided funds to areas hit by calamities that were caused by natural disasters. Now, most notably Los Angeles following the 1992 Rodney King riots. And stay where you are. You are watching CTV News. I'm Sonia Shrivastava.
And I'm Byron Scott.